As my father used to say, he was a very wise man, there's no bad here.
That's bad for a town.
Well, that's that bucket up.
Just drop it. Have you seen Dexter lately?
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 305th meeting since we started in 2009. We put a different speaker in every week, a different subject. They have to be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We give them an hour to make a presentation. After an hour, we have questions and answers. If anybody interrupts the speaker, we mind the interrupter. We listen only one fool at a time. That's one of our rules. And we have question and answers from the audience, not speeches. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium here to respond to the speaker said for or against. And our speaker gets the last word, gets comment and close the meeting. That's how it works. But before we introduce our speakers, now is the time for announcements. If anybody has announcements, now is the time. Any announcements? Any announcements? I can't believe this. No one has it. You got one up there, Jim? You got an announcement? Jim has an announcement.
Well, I haven't opened my mouth for a couple of weeks, so I guess I can tonight. But all of us are glad to have you here tonight. We're enjoying our new facilities. We appreciate the hospitality and the good food. And I've gotten absolutely no bad words from anybody about our service or our food. So if that should happen, please tell Tom or myself. We want to be sure it stays just right. I know Tom's come around and collected the $3, and he uses that to print up all the materials and go around and deliver it to a zillion places. He spends a couple of days doing that. And we buy our speakers dinner and do a few little odds and ends like that. But fortunately, because coming here, we get to come and have this dining room just for ordering food. So please, when you do come, please order a plate of food. Don't just come and sit and do a freebie when we're getting one. It wouldn't be fair to the restaurant. Be generous with our servers. They take good care of us. A lot of us come in here at one time, so that doesn't normally happen in a restaurant. A lot of people have a hard time coping with that when they have to serve a big group of people all at once, but they seem to have adapted to that real well. So that all seems to be working good. But we're glad all of you are here this evening. If anybody's here and has not yet started getting their meeting notices from Tom, catch him after the speaking is over and give him contact information, email preferably, so he can send you a copy of the notice and you know who's coming to speak and what's coming up in the following weeks. So I think that's about all I've got to say, Tom. Just a little brief welcome here, and glad to have you, and hope everybody enjoys it tonight.
Any other announcements? Anybody have announcements they want to make? No? All right, well, next week, John Beasley, he's sitting right there. He's our speaker. He'll be talking about has the U.S. committed socioeconomic suicide, which should be quite interesting. It's on your itinerary, so I don't want to read all this. The following week, we have on the inalienable right to choose. It's Linda Sproul. May 12th, we'll have May 12th, we have Linda, or March 12th, excuse me, Janet Lee. She's going to talk about leading a life of passion or balance, exploring alternative views of living a healthy life. That'll be on the itinerary. It's not on there right now, but it will be next week. On On March 19th, we have on supporting your local police and keeping them independent. You can look that up on the internet, that's with Randy Neal. That's on your itinerary there. Anyway, that's what's coming up. Tonight we have, the subject is on opposing the Texas-Pacific Partnership, TPP. George Nolan, President. Trans-Pacific. What did I say? Texas. Trans-Pacific Partnership, I can't read. George Nolan, the President of Texas Alliance for Retired Americans, former Braniff AP mechanic and supervisor and activist with Chicago, Dallas, Occupy Congress, and others, will discuss the opening of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. He will also show that this is a free trade agreement. This free trade agreement is NAFTA on steroids. George will argue that what we need is fair trade, not free trade. He will explain how this agreement will be a disaster for working Americans, seniors, and will further increase our trade deficit. George will show how this agreement is 40% of the world economy, and how American jobs will be offshored to countries like Vietnam, where the hourly wage of the U.S. is 56 cents an hour. He will offer suggestions as to what can be done to reverse this calamity. So without further ado, please give a very warm welcome to George Nolan. It's all yours, George.
Thank you, Tom, I think. Yeah, what I'm going to be talking about is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. Nations involved in the Trans-Pacific Partnership are the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, Chile, Peru, Japan, Mexico, and Canada. Right now, the TPP has been fast-tracked and is in Congress, which I hope some of you know. And what fast track means is Congress cannot amend, discuss, they can discuss the thing, but there's no amendments put to it. They have an up or down vote, and that's all they get. And of course, I've been very active in calling my congressmen and my senators, and the way I put it, being obviously I'm a Bernie man and an Obama man, I called Ted Cruz and told Ted's assistant, that we can't give Obama any victory. Vote no. The other people I called, I was amazed when they said, well, they're looking at it and they're going to probably amend it. I said, they can't do that. It's an up or down vote. So either the legislative assistants know nothing, or perhaps our senators and my congressmen know nothing. Could that be part of it? I'm not sure. The TPP has been negotiated in secret by multinational corporations from the above 12 countries who together represent 40% of the global economy. This is a big deal. This agreement would enable multinational corporations to undermine public interest rules through an international tribunal process called the Investor-State Dispute Settlement, which is the ISDS. This is really, really strange. Under this process, foreign companies can challenge any new law, regulation, or action at the federal, state, and local level. In other words, their part actually supersedes this tribunal of all countries, designated laws, and so forth. And this is rather scary. Okay, voting for the TPP means a lot of offshoring of jobs, lower wages for American workers. This is because It fails to address currency manipulation, has incredible weak rules of origin on auto and auto parts, and fails to level the playing field in terms of state-owned enterprise. When I say state-owned enterprise, China owns many things in Vietnam. They own it. The state of China, well, you can call it what, the country of China, so that's what that means. The playing field, okay, enterprise, and labor and environmental standards. It also lessens labor and environmental standards. Okay, TPP. Let me see here, the light's not good. Contains extreme patent protection for name brand drugs that threaten to restrict access to cheaper life-saving medicines in all TPP countries, including the US. In other words, I'm going to hit different points, what it does to seniors and to other things. Pharmaceutical interests are pushing for lengthy patent exclusiveness for certain types of drugs, including biologics, special drugs used to treat cancer and arthritis. This will make it more difficult for other companies to manufacture cheaper generic drugs, leading to higher costs for everyone. Okay, now I'm going to explain, I had a little problem with the donut hole myself. Some of the drugs I had to take for my heart problem are pretty expensive. And what happened was, I knew I was in the donut hole about last June. And what the donut hole is, it's the gap difference. $350 you pay full drug cost. I have Part D, medical. And then when you reach the point of $2,800, you start paying 45% of the drug cost. And this goes on, it went on for me right up until, December. And then it starts over again. So anyway, the difference is the cost, out-of-pocket cost from $2,800 to $4,500 is the donut hole. This will be closed by 2020, but right now it's closing each year slowly but surely. Well, I went in January to pick up my one group of pills, which keeps me going. Ticasent's the name of it. It stops AFib, and it works very well. And basically what happened was I realized that, hey, I was paying $147 when I'm in the donut hole, and they tell me that my cost of the drug had gone up, and now I have to pay $186. So anyway, I went home and I called, they said, call your insurance company, because I thought there was a mistake. There wasn't a mistake at all. And when I talked to this one kid, he says, well, go to Walgreens. I'm sure they're cheaper and it'll cost you X amount of dollars. And all the information this guy gave me was the wrong information. Because I don't know what it was, but my intuition when I was going to go to Tom Thumb and say, I'm going to Walgreens, I said, give him one more call. And I called back. And this girl got on the phone, and I was on the phone with her for at least a half hour. And she says, what do you want to do? Do you want to go from a tier 4 to a tier 3? I says, well, what does that mean? Rather than $186, it'll cost you $35 if your doctor goes along with it. And I said, well, that sounds good to me. So I called my doctor's office, and they said, sure, we want to help you as much as we can. So next year, for this year, my drug cost for that particular drug is $35. And see, some of these things, what I'm getting at, I'll tie this a little in as we go, because for seniors and for VA and for Medicaid people that have special deals that the government may help you, other countries can challenge that because it may cut into their profit, or even our country with our pharmaceuticals can challenge it because it's cutting into their profit. I don't know whether this would happen or not, but I figured this is something that I should tell you for those that don't know what the donut hole is and so forth. But I'm at that age where I'm on a fixed income, and to pay for your drugs, I know a lot of people don't have the money, and some cut down on their drugs. They figure, do I eat this week or do I have my pills taken? And one shouldn't have to make that decision. Okay, the TPP is in Congress on fast track. I've told you that. Can only study the TPP agreement and is not able to amend it. I believe most of the people in Congress have made their mind up already. You know, there's no doubt about it. When it got fast-tracked, I think there was something like all the Republicans wanted it fast-tracked, and I think there was about 8 Democrats that went along with them. And not that I'm a Democrat, but anyway, okay, special interests, oh yeah. The lobbyists, I am sure that the lobbyists and the special interests are contributing to the campaigns of these senators and congressmen, since they can put in as much money as they feel like it at any time, thanks to Citizens United and the McCutcheon versus FEC decision by the Supreme Court. And this is horrible, horrible. The TPP includes requirements that would waive by American and buy local preferences in many types of government purchasing, meaning out of our tax dollar, we might have to actually bid it with other countries, which is really sorry. Then investing at home to create jobs and increase pay. Many Chinese state-owned enterprises in Vietnam would be treated equally with us under this agreement. Firms on most U.S. government contracts, the TPP is a threat to U.S. and global economy, undermining environmental protections. The TPP undermining on the environmental protections of new conservation measures in the TPP. Most have extremely weak, such as exchange information and experience, and I wish I could see here, and endeavor not under the conservation efforts, rather than frequently to probe. Oh, it says, yeah, they can talk about it, but they can't do anything about it. Rather than requiring them to prohibit and ban destructive practices, all they can do is discuss it, which is ridiculous. The TPP's controversial investment state dispute settlement, the ISDS system, would enable foreign investors to challenge environmental and public health laws, regulations of the TPP brought in vested rights to an international tribunal. That's what the investor and state dispute settlement is. It's a tribunal that supersedes all governments that are signed to this particular thing. Despite the fact that the TPP could threaten climate policies and shift U.S. manufacturing to a more carbon-intense countries, the TPP fails to even include the word climate change. TPP could jeopardize food safety. Here's another thing. The TPP includes language not found in past trade agreements, allows exporter to challenge Board of Food Safety inspection procedures. This is a dire concern given that TPP includes Vietnam, Malaysia that export massive quantities of shrimp and fish and seafood to the U.S., significant amounts of which are now rejected as unsafe under current policies. So they could challenge this at that particular time. As well, new language in the final text for a so-called rapid response mechanism that requires inspectors to notify exporters for every food safety check that finds a problem and gives exporters the right to challenge the inspection determination, including potential laboratory or other testing methods. This may deter people and may leave the oversight where people said, I don't even want to try that, the inspectors. So it's a shame. I do want to note that, which some of you people may know and some may not know, the omnibus bill that was passed in either late November or early December, basically it passed Congress, and in there was a rider. It passed Congress, the president signed it and had a rider. The country of origin could no longer be put on food and other products. So this means rather than USDA inspected and so forth from the US, when we get our meats or our vegetables or so forth, it's against the TPP to put country of origin. And this could kill a lot of us, there's no doubt in my mind. Okay, actually NAFTA, I want to talk a little bit about other trade agreements we've made in the past. NAFTA took effect in 1994. And you people that are around, as old as me or even less, remember a guy running for president named Ross Perot. Said that a great sucking sound as American jobs went off to Mexico. Over 1 million American jobs were lost. And I voted for Ross that year. Too bad he didn't make it. It's probably his vice president that didn't know where he was, I don't know. Despite the overwhelming evidence that NAFTA is a failure, there have been and remain numerous attempts to expand this model to more countries around the world. We have the Korean Free Trade Agreement that was in 2011. It displaced 160,000 American jobs in the first 7 years. It will displace. Would increase our trade deficit tremendously. Average annual imports of cars and car parts has soared to 31% in the first 2 years. U.S. beef exports have declined by 10% under the FTA. U.S. pork by 19%. U.S. poultry, 31% collapse. With the Japanese, Australia and other countries newly empowered to launch ISDS attacks against the United States, the TPP would double U.S. IDS exposures. More than 1,000 additional corporations in the TPP nations, which own more than 9,200 subsidiaries here, could newly launch IDS cases against U.S. government. About 1,300 foreign firms with about 9,500 U.S. subsidiaries are so empowered under all existing U.S. investor state enforcement pacts. Most of these are developing nations with few investors here. That is why, until the TPP, the United States has managed largely to dodge ISDS attacks to date so far. In these multiple other ways, the TPP elevates investor rights over human rights and democracy, threatening an even broader array of public policy decisions than described above. This, unfortunately, is the all too predictable result of secretive negotiations process in which hundreds of corporate advisors had privileged access to negotiation texts while the public was barred from even reviewing what had been proposed in its name. The TPP does not deserve your support. Had fast track not become law, Congress could work to remove the misguided, detrimental provisions of the TPP, strengthening weak ones and add new ones, designed to ensure that our most vulnerable families and communities do not bear the brunt of TPP's many risks. Now the fast track authority is in place, Congress is left with no means of adequately amending the agreement without rejecting it entirely. We respectfully ask that they do that. And that's what I've got. Thank you.
You get to answer questions.
I'm not answering any questions.
You sit there and answer questions. I want to speak first.
So George, what's good about the TPP?
Nothing that I can see. It's another trade agreement. Rather, it's a free trade agreement. What we need is fair trade agreement, not free.
So why would Obama be in favor of this?
I wonder that myself, and that's why I call up and say, you know, Obama, we don't want to give him a victory. You know, why is he in favor? I agree with him on 95% of what's happened and what's been done, but this is one I vehemently disagree with.
Hi, George.
Hello,
Yeah.
John.
How are you doing? Anyway,
Good.
following on from Dale's question about Obama and his promotion, heavy promotion of this deal. Do you think it's the Wall Street interests that vote him just as they vote Hillary?
It certainly looks that way, that's for sure. In fact, he got the most from Wall Street than any other candidate has so far. And he's not like my man Bernie, which I am part of Bernie's super PAC. I gave $15.
Well, George, at last, we have found an issue we agree on.
You know, I was thinking of that tonight, John. I said, I know that John's gonna agree with this. That's good.
Yes, I was gonna say that too, George.
Uh-huh.
This is unbelievable. It's so damn disappointing. There's nothing to argue with you on tonight.
Well, I'll try to find something we can do next time.
Okay, now, is this working? Yes. You have said it in so many words. I would like for you to repeat out loud with me the following. Massive, come on,
Massive
conspiracy.
conspiracy. Oh, I do want to mention one other thing. We at the Texas Alliance of Retired Americans, which I am president of the Dallas chapter and all, me and Jack we've been going to our council meetings in Garland. And we've been sitting there for probably since October. And we sit right up front, right across from here. Your Dale is over there. That's about how close we are. And they've all been wondering, who in the hell are those guys? And then I had some lady come up. She was one of the council ladies. And she came up and she said, you guys sit here and you must be the happiest people I've ever met. You're always sitting up here smiling. And she said, when I was a little girl, the elderly people that had smile wrinkles, I wanted to be just like them. And then she said, but I still haven't. And I told her, well, maybe you're not old enough. Any more questions? Yes.
I'm very pessimistic about this piece of legislation not being defeated. It should never have been allowed to get to this point. So I'm assuming that it will pass, despite the efforts of both liberals and Republicans, conservatives and liberals. So what can be done after it passes to fight it and to contest it?
I think what we have to do is not pass it. We have to call our congressmen and our senators, and whichever way you can get them to say no, say no. Whether it's telling them you don't want to have a victory for Obama, so vote no. Or it's bad for the country, and it certainly is. Once it gets in there, it's like the other trade agreements. We are screwed.
Hi, George.
Hello.
You've mentioned what it does to, like NAFTA did to the U.S., but it did really horrible stuff to other countries. Can I mention a few items that?
Sure.
For example, in Mexico, what happened was that the subsidized food industry poured all this corn into Mexico. And that basically, the small family farmer could not compete with this cheap corn. And they couldn't make their living. And guess what? That's when the illegal immigration spiked. Okay? And the same thing happened with Haiti. That cheap corn was just poured into Haiti, and those family farmers could not sustain their families. And we got Haitians coming up here too. So people don't talk about that, but the damage goes both ways.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, Rosalinda, because that's true. In a lot of places you may even find here, which I haven't found that much, but in other places like New Zealand, I think they called it fair trade things, that you were actually buying from people that got a decent, or at least the going price for their coffee beans or their corn or whatsoever. You're right, trade agreements like this really ruin everything, because it's not for the little person, it's for the large Monsantos and other people of the world. Thank you. Anybody else?
What are the positions of the major presidential candidates on this issue? And in particular, can you talk about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton?
Actually, I don't want to talk about either one of them, but I will talk about Bernie. As soon as we chant, Bernie, Bernie, he lost, by the way, in Nevada. Basically, Bernie has been against the TPP since its inception. He's also been against all the trade agreements that have come down the pipe, from the Colombian Free Trade Agreement, which supposedly was going to stop the violence against unions, which never did, to the Korean Free Trade Agreement, which they started just undercutting our steel and bringing it in here on less than cost and so forth. And then what we'd have to do was bring them to court, but this took years, and hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs. So I'm very leery of these free trade agreements. Yeah, Tom, I wish I could read up here too. You can't see. I mean, I'm going blind. John.
George, the interesting thing, you might think that you know my position, and that you know my position on unions. I'm not categorically against unions, but I would ask you the question that, is it your union orientation, your union participation that was the eye-opener for you, that informed you of the bad legislation with TPP?
It was a combination of many things. I am fairly interested in what happens in my world and in your world. And as you've seen me before, I am an activist, and I do get involved where and when I can, when I believe in something. And that's what I believe people have to do, is to stand up for their rights, and whether they be union rights or not. You know, just plain human rights is something that we have to stand up to. And, you know, that's the way I feel about it. Yes, John?
What do you think possesses the masses of people in North Texas to support Ted Cruz?
I would like to say temporary insanity, but I don't think it's temporary.
George, Trump said that the TPP would be a terrible agreement for jobs in this country, and that America is already losing a fortune to China, adding that it is hard to believe it is going to get worse. I might add that Ted Cruz originally voted for fast track and only withdrew his vote when it appeared that it was going to pass.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, that sounds like it's always easy to be against something until you realize it's going to pass, and then you can drop your opposition. Very good move, Ted.
Bernie's done the same thing for a number of issues.
I'd rather not have anybody talk ill on Bernie. Now, we could chant, though, Bernie, Bernie. Go ahead.
Is the TPP the only such broad international agreement of that kind being discussed, or are there other such agreements?
No, right now it's the TPP and only the TPP. All the rest have been implemented already, you know.
What happened to the TTIP, the Transatlantic Partnership?
I don't know what happened to that. Do you know?
No, I actually
I don't either.
I used to hear about it a lot, now I don't hear much about it.
I don't know. Hey, I want to show you guys, a lot of people cut and paste. I do it the old school way. cut a piece of paper and glued it on. Yes, sir.
George, I don't know how many people actually think about the reverse psychology Obama has taken. And, you know, he has accomplished certified accomplishments, over 300 things in an obstructive type Congress. And I think the guy doesn't want the TPP. He just knows that if he goes for it, they're going to go against him. And that's my contention.
Might be.
I would counter that view, and I would state rather that Obama's position is what the teleprompter says it is.
That's what I needed, was a teleprompter. Does anybody have one at home or something? The lighting's poor.
What's Hillary's position on it?
Hillary has said she's against the TPP. I think this came out in December. You know, not sure. She was certainly for it until she realized that a lot of her constituents and Bernie's constituents were against it, so, yeah.
She's a big Monsanto supporter.
Yeah. Do you know, I'll tell you a quick story here. I was in New Zealand for 2 years, living there. And I knew that he was director of agriculture in New Zealand. He had just got the job, he was a Canadian. And Monsanto came in and sold trainloads of corn and put it in there and said they were not GMO type stuff. They basically lied. New Zealand government made them dig every seed back up again and get New Zealand the money back, and they were fine. So, you know, we don't seem to do things like that, and maybe we should.
Trump's position is against it, right?
Well, yes, he can negotiate a better one, you know. Trump's position, I'll put it this way, he's loud and boisterous, and he doesn't even need a microphone. But yeah, he said he's against that particular one. Not that he tear it up, that he would renegotiate, which he probably doesn't realize, fast track, he can't do anything until it's voted on in Congress.
And Cruz is for it, right?
Oh, I don't know. He was for it before, John said, and then...
Yes, he voted for it.
And then the vote...
What about the other guys, Rubio and Bush? You know?
They're too busy with their food fight, throwing food at one another. I haven't heard anybody, aside from Trump, mention TPP. Well, tell him, come on up, I'll order my food. Hi, Jen.
Yeah, again.
Yes.
Would you agree that the trade deficit is the root cause of America's problems today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't have the manufacturing we once had, and it's eroded completely since the Reagan days.
George, can you go so far as to say that we should go back prior to NAFTA and GATT and have tariffs again? Can you go back that far?
You know, I believe we need something to protect not only our industries, to keep them here, our workers that work here, because it's eroded like crazy since, well, NAFTA, with that big sucking sound, was the jobs going down there. So.
Do you agree with me that we should have gone back 70 years and never promulgated the Bretton Woods Agreement that started all this nonsense?
No, I've heard you say it before. Tell me what it is.
Well, when I get up and speak, I'll allow
Okay.
for the crew.
Okay, very good, thanks.
Hello, I would like to just ask people to go back and look very precisely at what Hillary Clinton has said about the TPP. I did not hear her say that she would never support the TPP. I heard her say, I thought it was the gold standard, I've looked at it again, and at this time, I can't support it. To me, you know, back on the farm, that's what we used to refer to as a lawyer's answer.
Uh-huh. I understand that. Yeah.
Right. Hey, Tom?
But do you, since this agreement was promulgated by lawyers, do you think most lawyers don't have the brains they were born with?
Of a what?
Most lawyers don't have the brains they were born with.
Oh, that's true. Very true. Very true. I'll have to ask Albert that.
No, I think you're right. I think they've greatly increased them along the way by hard study and by being practical solutions that have answers that you would never dream would be right until you get there.
Well, that's good.
Tom's wandering around aimlessly.
Albert, that's cagey repartee if I've ever heard it. Well, George, I was trying to see if you would agree. One of the issues kind of hiding in this whole haystack or woodpile or whatever it is here is the issue of national sovereignty or globalism. And I don't think, if you examine it carefully, anyone would be able to disagree that the TPP is one of those building blocks of globalism. What's your position on that?
I really think you're right, John. Like I said, I went before my city council and talked about having them make a resolution to oppose the TPP. And to my surprise, not really, I think half of them didn't know what I was talking about, you know.
They probably thought you were wanting them to ban toilet paper.
You're probably right.
George, you know who promulgated this law, who promoted it and put it together and suggested that the legislature get involved with it and do it?
I think who promoted it was corporate interest all over the world, not just in the United States, but globally, like John was saying. And it was, I'm going to say one thing here. I was hoping that Joe Allen would be here tonight. It was 2011 that we went to the International Hotel in Addison. They were having a meeting to discuss the TPP.
Secret.
Yeah, but they let so many people in, and I was with Occupy at the time, and quite a few of those were called stakeholders. They went in there, and as they did, Ron Kirk, the mayor, he used to be mayor of Dallas, was the chief negotiator at the time. And this is what I heard from people that were in there, Joe Allen especially. I wish Joe was here tonight, because he was in there and was sipping whatever he was sipping with the rest of them, having a good old time. And Joe was there to find out what was going on. And this one guy came up, the moderator, the guy that was moderating, he grabbed the speaker from him. And he said, I want to give Ron Kirk a plaque. He's done such a grand job with this TPP. And Ron stopped everything and started walking towards the stand. And the guy said, And I'd like to thank you for all you've done with this negotiation. You have not listened to the people, and he named off the different countries, and also not listened to the people in the United States. And at that particular time, they knew he was a plant. And 2 cops came in and grabbed one on each arm and started dragging him out. And he said, "Can I get another glass of wine to go?"
George, I have heard that about 40% of the world's economy will be regulated by this treaty, and that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of pages that have never been released to public scrutiny. Now, it sounds to me like this is absolute fascism being put into place.
Albert, John, I agree with you. Absolutely. Hey, Tom, could I eat? Could I please eat? No, go ahead. Somebody wants to talk.
Anybody, any more questions?
And thank you for your attention.
Okay, you get to sit down and you get to eat.
Yeah.
It's your turn to talk. Okay, it's your turn to talk. Who wants to be first? All right. And there's chairs up here. If you're going to be a speaker up here, there's chairs to sit up here.
Anyway, thanks, George. It's always a delight to hear you saying it like it is. I must say that this Trans-Pacific Partnership is another stepping stone in the total selling out of America. It really is very, very dangerous. Really, what we have is multinational cartels, basically, that are taking over the world. And they really don't give a damn about ordinary people at all. None. Zero. And of course, next week I'll talk about the effects it's been having on people, especially the white people, in fact, and I'll talk about that next week. But I will talk about the starting conference that started all this, and this was the Bretton Woods Agreement, which I've spoken about before here. There were 3 deals done against Great Britain during the war. One was Lend-Lease, second was Bretton Woods, and the third was the loan. And they were masterpieces of putting Britain under the water, really. That's a fact. But anyway, the second part of the Bretton Woods Agreement went as follows. It happened in July '44. Cordell Hull called a conference, 44 nations of the world, really to establish the post-war framework for recovery. And out of that conference came 2 institutions. One was the World Bank, that was to fund international development. And the second was basically an institution that became the IMF. And that was really to act as the World Bank, okay, in trading relationships. And actually, now, there were 2 plans put forward at the IMF. One was the American plan by Harry Dexter White, and that went as follows: that all currencies would be fixed with respect to the dollar. Like there were so many pounds to the dollar, German marks to the dollar, lira to the dollar, and the dollar was fixed at $35 an ounce. It was fixed relationship. And that was the one plan that was accepted. By 1948, it was impossible, because basically it just wouldn't work. The countries of Europe wanted American goods, and they couldn't pay for them, and then the Marshall Plan came in and so on. Now, the alternative plan was put forward by Lord Keynes, and his plan was this. He wanted floating currencies. He wanted an international currency called the Bancor. Bancor, 2 parts, bank, or bank gold. So instead of having gold, you basically have paper. And the Bancor would be so the dollar would be tied to the Bancor, and they say the Chinese yen would be tied to the Bancor. Now, when you paid, settled up internationally, you paid in Bancors. Now, if you had a trade deficit, as America has today, then what would happen would be this, that every so often, say every 6 months, then you'd have to settle up. In fact, the IMF would act as a clearing bank, that's to say clear debts. So what would happen is that the US dollar would drop with respect to the Bancor, say by 5%, and the Chinese currency, the yuan, would go up, okay, by 5%. So what would happen is the Chinese goods would get more expensive, American goods would get cheaper. So by this mechanism, there would be no trade imbalance. So you would always end up with a trade balance. So America could not have run up this amount. What today is, it must be approaching $18 trillion, trillion, about equal to the whole gross national product. Now, this situation, of course, started in the 80s, and it's been growing and growing. And the consequences have been terrible. And that is all basically started in 1944 by the hubris of Morgenthau, who was the Secretary of Treasury, but fronted by Harry Dexter White, who I believe later on proved to be a communist. So whether he was sabotaging America, I do not know, but all I do know is that Keynes was basically humiliated by White, and especially when he negotiated the loan agreement later on. But in my book, I pondered the fact, did Keynes realize what was going to happen when America went along this route? Because as I say, as early as the late 50s, America was running at a trade deficit and was shipping gold and losing gold a lot, just within 15 years, as the other countries were. So that was that was a signal moment when America went off the track, and it's been going off the track ever since. And all these trade agreements are nothing more than the globalization and the cartelization of the world, where a few ultra-rich people, most of them running these cartels, never in fact were entrepreneurs with these cartels. They were hired hands that got MBA degrees in Harvard and didn't start these big companies like Shell, like Walmart, et cetera, but they're the ones that are running things. And they are going to destroy everything before long. And in my case, when Reagan came in, I was telling my friends, look, this is going to be a disaster. And they couldn't believe it. And I said, well, but if I'd stood there and I told them, look, in 30 years' time, the country will be in hock to communist China, it would have been laughable. But that's exactly what's happened. And I find it astounding that a country could get in this position. I really, really do. And I would say to all these congressmen on the steps of the Capitol, coming out wearing their American badges on the lapel pins, you have sold out this country. You are disgusting. You really are. And if you want to protest, then I would lead it. They should go there and howl these people down, saying, look, you're traitors to this country. How dare you stand there with your badges? Take them off. I mean, And really, in my mind, Bernie should, if he's going to say anything at all, he should start saying that. Along with the fact that people like Ted Cruz are deeply religious, profoundly unchristian, And really, if that guy got in, it would be disaster. It would really be a disaster. And as I say, why these maniacs vote for him in this part of the world, I do not know. He's a disaster. He is an economic ignoramus and a dangerous, vile person, in my judgment.
Mine too, John.
When you study the issue of vote fraud, you find that usually when there is a close race, when you're flipping coins, that's probably vote fraud you're seeing. Sounds like it was a close race in Nevada as well. We're told Bernie lost. Are you sure? No?
Not sure.
Not sure. So what to do about the TPP? Hang on for the roller coaster ride. I don't know how to stop this thing. We can be stronger individuals. I have recommendations. As I get older, I'm learning. Rise early. If you got to take a nap in the afternoon, do it. But make sure you rise early. Physical exercise. If you think you're holding your ground and you're past 50, you're probably kidding yourself, unless you have some exercise program. Musical instrument. There was a study done recently that when one takes up the practice of a musical instrument, they're using all parts of their brain in a very unique way. And I know from taking up the practice of a musical instrument here this last 4.5 years, my typing is back up. I'd say it's probably around 100 words per minute right now. I'm amazed. We have a lot of capabilities as individuals to stay strong. What we have that we're looking at, and I spoke about this recently, we're looking at probably a bank holiday coming up soon. I don't know how soon. What is a bank holiday? A bank holiday is when the bank closes for the weekend and they're never supposed to stay closed for more than 2 days. And yet, when the weekend finishes up, they don't come back. I don't know what reason will be given. Could be a number of reasons. They could claim cyber attack. But there's a lot of rebalancing that is about ready to be done in the financial sector. And a whole basket of currencies are going to see an adjustment as they go to the Basel III requirements with a 20% asset backing of a nation's currency. It's a whole new valuation. It's a whole new system. I have some conspiracy theories regarding it. I won't touch it this time. But I think there's some things that are going to happen. But you can verify this from the news. This is in the news. Christine Lagarde has spoken about it. A number of different people have spoken about it. The problem is, it's just like a 747 going over at altitude. Nobody notices because you don't know what they're talking about. Suggestions: make sure you have, if you use purified water, make sure you got a lot on hand. Make sure you have, make sure you keep your gas tank full. There are people telling me, take what money you can out of the bank, keep enough money for, at first they were saying 3 to 10 days. Actually, they were saying 3 to 5 days initially. Then on a last economic call I'm on, they're saying, well, like we were talking about, have enough money for 4 to 6 weeks. I'm like, 4 to 6 weeks? That's hardly imaginable. It's hardly imaginable what would happen in this country if banking shut down for that period of time. But there is something that we're right on the edge of, and it's kind of like you can hear the freight train, you can hear the ground rumbling. It just hasn't come around the corner yet, but the corner is very close. So what can we do about the TPP? Hold on tight, folks.
Thank you, John.
We got it next. If you want to speak up here, there's a couple chairs. If you, any other speakers? We're gonna have any, how about you?
Oh, all right.
All right. If you'd like to be a speaker up here, there's some chairs. Then we know you're next.
It's a big crowd, Tom. I was gonna do it on humility, but the crowd wasn't big enough.
Well, again, George, you've disappointed me tonight. Nothing to argue with you about. I think this TPP is probably the worst bulldozer of American civilization that we've ever seen. I think that it will be the end of our entire constitutional system. 40% of the world's economy involved in this thing, and we're definitely going to feel it. And no one can take it to a court. It goes to a corporate fascist committee to decide anything. And of course, they're not going to decide anything that's against them. That's very typical of fascism. I think that when you look at how pervasive this is and how it is just probably the last nail in the lid of the coffin, starting with things like GATT and NAFTA and the UN and different things like this. This has been going on for a long, long time, step by step by step by step. People have been brainwashed little by little by little suggestions you never know, subliminals and so forth. Lots of subliminals on TV. A lot of brainwashing is going on in this world, particularly in this country, because the United States historically has been the country that'll pick up guns and go somewhere in the world and fight for the freedom of people we don't even know. Of course, we're stupid enough to believe the false flags that take us into like Vietnam and over in the Middle East. That's unfortunate. People need to wake up. Some are. A lot aren't. Awakening is the biggest thing that we need to work on now, and forget your political parties, forget your right, your left, which heel you're going to put your razor on in the cockfight. That's how they keep us divided. They keep us warring against each other, figuratively and literally. And that way it's easy to control people. That's that old thing of create a crisis and provide a solution. Well, the crisis was to get people to accept the solution they never would have accepted had the crisis not happened. These are false flags. They happen all the time. It's very easy to mind control people, to walk into the theater in Aurora and start shooting up people or whatever else, all of these. In my opinion, they're all mind control victims. And I think they should all be put under psychiatric treatment. Sirhan has no memory, apparently, of ever having shot Kennedy. So that should tell someone something. We are in desperate need to wake up, to take all of the little political issues and put them aside. Those that we're driven by emotion to follow, put them aside. Emotion is one of your greatest enemies. Without it, you're a sociopath, but it has to be controlled by thinking. And then thinking has to be controlled by further thinking so that you can listen and stop thinking so that you can hear a much greater source of intelligence than we think that we can think. I hope somehow this thing gets defeated. I hope that we stimulate a lot of other people to contact their representatives in Washington and get a vigorous protest against this thing. It will be a disaster. I think it will be the end of the United States. It's almost here anyway. It's the country that I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. I've actually been contemplating, well, where else in the world would I like to live when it becomes a police state here? And we're very close to that. And again, I'm going to mention Yuri Bezmenov. Go listen to an interview by him where he's talking with a man, and he was a KGB infiltrator in the process of trying to convert India to communism. He talks about how the whole plan is laid out. And the interesting thing is the last phase before the police state. It's heavily reliant on those people who have big hearts and care about other people and want to help everybody, i.e. the liberals. He specifically says this. And they rush it all in and turn all the power over to the government, and now the government's going to do all these things for all these people that it's promised it will do. And then when it's the police state, these are going to be the greatest resistors of this thing that is put in place and has betrayed humanity. And so what do? Well, the night before they decide it's the police state, they round up all the liberals and take them out in the field and shoot them. In South Vietnam, they killed 7,000 people in one night. This is what they do. And I think we all need to wake up. We're all victims of this evil system that seems to be controlling this world. And they do not think of you as human beings. They think of you as animated clay. Because they're basically Satanists. They're sociopaths in their thinking. They're so driven by greed and lust for power that they have destroyed free enterprise. They have destroyed the idea of everybody gets an equal chance here, and we're not going to let any one organization get so powerful that it drives everybody else out. And that's where government is supposed to enforce its antitrust laws, which we don't do anymore, and not put in these laws that put in a fascist dictatorship. And that's what we're seeing. If this goes through, the country's over. And I probably will want to find some little remote area that'll be one of the last ones that they'll want to convert into their misery and just live my life out there. Because this will be hell on earth here if this fascist movement takes over. And you don't like the word conspiracy? Wake up. They've been planning this for years. Go again on the internet and look up the Georgia Guidestones and read the principles that they have outlined that they're going to do. Bring the earth to a sustainable population level, the whole earth, of under 500 million. What do we have, 7.5 billion? It's a lot of killing. A lot of killing. But that's their principle. And it's stated there in, I think, 5 different languages and several other languages. These people have to pre-announce what they do. It's part of their ritual and their cult. And they're all heavily involved in it, although they hold themselves out proudly in their countries as being, oh, we're Anglican, we go to church every day, or we're Baptist, or we're whatever. That's sheep's clothing for these wolves. And most of the people up there in Washington, D.C. are dipped in sheep's clothing. They've been sheep dipped, the word is. Fortunately, there are some sheep and wolves clothing up there. It would have been over with a long time ago. And hopefully, we can support these people, and we can, you know, it never made it into the news here, but in Iceland, if you don't know about it, when they had their financial collapse, I think in 2008, the people said, hey, to hell with this, you bankers. We didn't cause this. This is not our debt. This is your debt, and you're not going to put it on us. Thousands of their citizens got pots and pans and spoons and surrounded their Congress buildings and beat on those things, thousands of people simultaneously, day in and day out, until they drove their Congress out. They drove their whole government out, and then they held public elections, put in a whole new government. And the last I heard, I think 26 of their bankers are in prison now. We need to do that here. The biggest evil organization on earth is the international banking system, of which the Federal Reserve is a part. Again, I've said this 100 times. Thomas Jefferson made a statement similar to, if we ever let a private bank get control of our money, i.e. the Federal Reserve, then through inflation and deflation, which we have seen a ton of, and the corporate structure that will grow up around the bank, which they can fund with limitless, unchecked money that they can print or put on their computer, they will steal all the property from our descendants and leave them homeless in the land that we have founded. Is that not what's happening? Thomas Jefferson must have time traveled from now back to then to plant that seed in human consciousness. You know, I mentioned, I think last week, about the Federalist Papers, and I was not interested in the content of them so much, but the fact that they were written in English that is difficult for most educated people today to understand. And they were to be passed out on the street to everybody. Our educational system has been reduced to a very poor state. We went from number 1 to 40 some odd, the last I heard, in nations, the educational system in a nation. This is part of the plan. You have to make people stupid if you want to control them. And drugs. I would suggest that everyone, as much as they are capable, get away from the pharmaceutical industry. Get away from it. There was an interview of a man who had retired from the pharmaceutical industry years ago that a friend was recording about 2 o'clock in the morning. And that interview was actually jerked off the air before it was finished, but he got a significant portion of it. And this guy stated that every drug is designed only to mask the symptoms of a disease, not to cure it. Because if they cure it, you don't need the drug anymore, and look how much money they lose. And every drug contains in it other chemicals that when you take that drug over time, you develop another disease for which they have another drug and another. How many older people are on a whole lot of drugs right now? Why do you think that is? That's the cleverness of the pharmaceutical industry. These people are just pure evil, and we need to wake up to this. This whole TPP is pure evil. We need to wake up to it and to resist it as much as possible. And George, enjoy your dinner. Damn it, nothing I can argue with you about.
Well, I'm going to admit that I haven't read the agreement that you discussed tonight.
Nobody has.
And I don't know what's in it, but if some of the things that you alluded to are in it, it's really, we can see some of the examples, some of the stuff we get from China that's not inspected, that cause a lot of harm to a lot of people. And I can't disagree a great deal with what Albert has said. We don't always agree, but we live to disagree, I guess, sometimes. But I'm an advocate of fair trade, and I have been even when NAFTA came along, because if we don't have a manufacturing base, we don't have nothing to sell. Now, one of the things I think may be that you alluded to may not be true. It's those principles, if you're dealing with trading that good with another country or with a member nations, but if you're dealing with it within the United States, I don't think those rules will apply. But again, I haven't read it. And if what you said is there, we are really in tough shape. We elect very unwise people to do things for us, and it's greed. It's done because they've been paid to do it. And as Abbott said, our education system hurts us because we don't teach people to think. The history that we teach in public school is patriotism, not history. And so we brainwash people that the United States is the greatest place in the world, we do all the right things, and we don't. We do some good things. I think the American people as a whole are very compassionate when reacting to something. When someone is hurt in a natural disaster or something like that, we'll go forward with our money to try to help them. But we don't empower people in this country. We don't empower people to do for themselves. And that's what education should do. It should empower people to do for themselves. There are certain things government should only do for us what we can't do for ourselves. But when we create poverty and a lot of other issues, well, then we have created a dependent population. And, we can't just let them die. We have to do something. I think we have to trade, but it should be on a fair trade. It ought to be trade in areas that we can. I don't think the tariff system we had that NAFTA was supposed to get away from was a good system, because if one nation increased its tariff, then it was a zero sum. Someone else would do the same thing, and so it wouldn't benefit no one. But to have a system where people agree not to do that, but the agreement should be reciprocal benefit to the nations that are involved, NAFTA, Canada, Mexico, and the United States, but we do have a deficit with all of them. And the deficit is going to hurt us as much as the trade deficit, as much as our fiscal deficit. And the only thing I know, I think it's going to be difficult to change this. The president has spoke vehemently in support of it. But this agreement didn't just happen since 2008. It's been worked on years and years before. And the agreement with South Korea, Colombia, and Panama is similar to NAFTA. And we don't build in any protection. Like someone has said, the way we flood the markets makes it difficult for small farmers to survive. We don't have any small farmers in the United States anymore. It's all corporate farming. And so we, as a people, need to come together and like I would say, get beyond what the little petty ass things that we deal with and think about what's best for all of us. And when the people do that, they do bring changes. Now on TPP, if what has been told to us is true, it may not be much we can do, but we can at least get out of it. And that may be what we ultimately have to do if it does all the harm. We know what NAFTA's done, and I can predict what the agreement that Ron Kirk negotiated with South Korea, Panama, and Colombia. It's the same kind of agreement as NAFTA. The results are going to be similar. And so we need to deal with fair trade where we have a fair chance, a reciprocal chance of competing. We need to think in terms of how do we rearrange, restructure our national economy so that it's competitive in the global economy. We continue to operate as if we are so dominant. And when we look at the outcomes, we're not that dominant. We have we are a debtor nation. We, like someone is Abbott alluded to, our education system is weak. And all the things that help people is not there. We don't empower. We kind of put people in situations that they never get out of, like the programs that we created during the last depression to help people. So it's supposed to be short term, but they're still in effect. And we made some changes in '96 in that program, and we got about half of the people off. And we created some, I don't know where it is today because of 2008. I don't think that they could continue to do what they're doing. But we need to think about what's best for all of us. And if we do that, I think we elect people who will represent us and won't be doing it just for the money. And you think about individuals, we have to think first about ourselves and what motivates us. Many people who serve in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, if they had to work for a living, they wouldn't be earning nearly what they're earning right now. And so they have the ability to get elected, and they use things to polarize us, as this election is going on right now. It's polarizing people based on fear, misunderstanding, and things that are absolutely untrue. But people believe it because they're frustrated. And what I fear a revolution in this country, where people are going with all these guns they have is going to try to attack the federal government. And that'll be catastrophic because they don't have what the Defense Department has. And if you think they won't do it, let them stand out that way and see what happens. But we are doing that, we're hurting, to me, you're hurting everybody, the rich and the poor and the working people. And why people can think about what's best for all of us. And then, we all don't need to be rich. But I think the average person just wants to earn a good living and be left alone. But we can't just sit back and do it the way we are right now. So I'm not too much on conspiracy theories. I try to look at things as factual as I can, and I get frustrated sometimes. This election year is frustrating. But I'm not in love with Bernie Sanders as much as the speaker was. Thank you.
We're running out of speakers?
We still got you, Tom.
I'll go find one.
Oh, come on up here.
Yeah, two quick points. Actually, Joe Allen is returning to his home base of Missouri by the end of the month. In fact, so I don't know. I asked him if he'd come next Saturday. Perhaps we could do something for him. He certainly
has been a passionate supporter of the little guy and the little business guy. I mean, he was put out of business by Walmart, so he knows what it's like because he created thousands of jobs and Walmart came in and wiped them out. So that's, but Calvin, what you were talking about is socialism, okay? Caring more about society than about rich individuals. And as I've said before, I benefited from socialism in England right after the war. It was quite remarkable what was done. And so I think, but Americans don't think about that. They've been told to think about themselves, especially with Thatcherism and Reagan. It was all about selfishness. And that's really, and so they're ready to believe that they're paying tons of money to fund people who don't want to work, who want to shirk, and so on and so forth. So it's easy to turn working people against each other. It's easy to blame the unions that caused all the problems, when in fact it wasn't the unions, it was the external forces. And now for the last 35 years, it's been the corporations really that have been reaping the rewards really of any growth in the economy. And next week I'll talk about what's happened to the poorest whites, actually. It's quite astounding what's gone on. So I invite you to come next week to listen to what's really been going on. It's really dreadful. And you're right, Calvin. What I fear is a revolution in this country. I mean, people are getting angry and angrier with good reason. And I don't think if it goes on much more, because this will lead to this huge, and it is the trade deficit that's a problem. It's decimated jobs and the future of this country. And one day, if it goes on, as Albert says, it is fascism that we're seeing, worldwide fascism, where a few misguided megalomaniacs really want to control and steal from everybody. And they've been doing it on a grand scale. And if it goes on, there will be an explosion. We're about due for another recession. Every 8 years, roughly, we have a recession. Last one was 2008. It's now 2016. So this wobble we've seen in the stock markets since January the 1st is really a sign of this. I mean, but mind you, this is just a skimming off, you know, the investors really. But we are due for a recession. I mean, this bubble economy we're living in isn't a real economy. We know it. We know it. It's puffed up by phony money and the printing from the Federal Reserve. But you're wrong, Albert. It's not the Federal Reserve that's done things. Well, I'll talk about it next week. It's called the shadow banks, really. I'll talk about them next week. But yeah, we are in a desperately bad situation, and it's getting worse. Nothing's being done about it. Nobody talks about it. They talk about nonsense things because that's all people, they can get scared by terrorism when, God, there's infinitely small chance of being hurt by a terrorist in this country. Yet, people are scared about it, rush out by machine guns and every other sorts of guns. And the most probable thing, as I've said before, is they'll kill each other. And they are. And themselves. Mostly themselves.
Okay, John.
The media is the one selling revolution. And I would be very careful about taking that in. I would say the American people in general, overall, have been very circumspect and very controlled in a situation that we're in right now. There is an alternate to revolution, and that is individually just being disobedient, just not following all the rules that they try to require. I can't advise anyone what to do, and I wouldn't give specifics, but if they're trying to herd everybody to go that way, well, maybe you just kind of want to go that way, and maybe a lot of people just go that other way. And when you have a lot of people cumulatively in an aggregate being disobedient, it's just kind of like herding cats, and it becomes an issue. Hey, I'm an American cat. I'm not an obedient dog. I don't understand why there's this connection with weapons and violence. I don't understand the mindset that produces that. If you go back and you really study history, very few revolutions were genuine. The vast majority of revolutions were promoted by some interests, were false flags of one sort or another. And our history books many times don't tell us accurately what happened there. If a revolution begins in this country, I would say 90% plus, it's something contrived. It's a government move, it's a false flag. Do not join it, do not get involved. Stand back and watch and stay true to yourself. We're in a situation, again, I was saying, we may have a bank holiday. One of the purposes, if you have been noticing the news, they are talking about removing cash. Prominent people around the world are coming out and saying, we need to get rid of cash. We need to get rid of the $100 bills. That's just too much crime for $100 bills. You can buy very little with a $100 bill these days. So what are we supposed to have? Loads of 20s? If they go on bank holiday for any extended period, people will spend every bit of cash they have just to cover essentials. And when the banks come back, they may say, folks, we're going all digital. You are then in a totally different paradigm, which is Albert's nightmare. Thank you.
Am I the last one standing? I guess I am. Seems that way. All right. Well, I want to thank our speaker tonight. Did a terrific job. Got us all going. He likes to glare at people sometimes. Tonight he didn't get to do it. Everybody agreed with him. Anyway, if you look at history as to what has happened, we have a situation where corporations are ruling the world. You know, they're bigger than countries. We've let this happen. We have a situation where we've let corporations rule the roost. Today we are faced with corporations exiting the country to go where labor costs are cheaper, which does much to dehumanize our rights and to, I can't read my own writing, and to, it's the light maybe, and to enormous unaccountable national debt, which shouts for something to be done to create a more ideal society. We can't go on with corporations ruling the roost and leaving us holding the bag, because that's what's happened. They've gone overseas to make more money, and we've lost a good economy. You manufacture, you sell, and you produce in the same country. You have a good economy, you have good jobs, you have everything. But if the corporation leave town and you go overseas, you don't have a good economy. You're a service economy, and you end up in the huge debt which we're in. And corporations are ruling the roost. And we've got 300 million people plus in this country. There's 1.some billion in China. There's over 1 billion people in India. They've got a bigger GNP than we do, and we're in trouble, and we know it, and we've got to do something about it. Of course, we were to put tariffs on corporations equal to the difference in labor, environmental, and transportation costs, recognizing that sustainable economies will only maintain viability where manufacturing, sales, and consumption are within each respective country. We don't need to have standing armies around the world to protect our perceived vital interests.
Hey, Tom.
What?
You got a point of order here.
Yeah?
The headlines, Jeb Bush just dropped out.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, that's good to hear. Anyway.
First Scalia, now Jeb Bush.
He didn't drop dead, he dropped out.
We don't need to have standing armies around the world to protect perceived violence. Unfortunately, today we have the best Congress that money can buy. In effect, corporations are ruling the roost. They have too much influence on Congress. By definition, corporation controlling Congress is fascism, but Congress has to act. What will it do to take action that will lead to a more ideal life and ideal society? In my view, they would act to keep the money they raised for re-election, which would foster free airtime for the next 90 days of a general election. The incumbent and the challenger would both have free airtime. Congress would vote for it because they have no history of a challenger defeating an incumbent, and they don't like spending all their time raising money for the next election. If we were to do that, we might be able to get Congress to act to put tariffs on corporations, put the jobs in this country, and maybe even shorten the workday down the road. That would be my view, anyway. Our speaker gets the last comment. Come on up here. You get to comment on a comment and close the meeting.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. I've never heard that talk before, and I appreciate it. But anyway, I'm amazed tonight with Albert and John, and I agreed with them, and I even said a few things that I was led to, which I truly believe in too. So it's been quite a night. One of the things that ever since I retired, I had a chance to see what was going on around me. It wasn't just to earn a living, buy food, raise my family, and so forth. I had a chance to do things, and I became an activist. In 2013, I wish Joe was here tonight, but he knew about it. We went to Walmart and had a protest, and we blocked Lake June Road, 13 of us. We had a planned civil disobedience. And what really shocked me, they came up, we were even told what to do beforehand. In other words, when the police came up, they say, get off the road. And we say, we respectfully decline. And after the third time, they said, put your hands behind your back. And they cuffed us. And I could not believe that Box Springs police had that many handcuffs. And then I said, what am I thinking? They went into Walmart and bought some. But the truth is, I was to occupy Congress. I went up there when Congress came back in 2011. I went up there with a lot of occupiers. But unlike them, I did not sleep in the rain, get in a tent. My sister-in-law lived in Fairfax. I slept in a nice warm bed and then got on the metro in the morning and went down and protested like a civilized person should. But one of the things I'm going to tell you about is I got very bored out there. We were on the Capitol lawn, and we saw one young man just jump over the wall. The police are about 10 yards apart, and bolt up the Capitol steps, and they nailed him. You know, they got him. So anyway, I sat there wondering, what should I do? And I was about from here to Albert, away from the wall that they had set up there. And there was a young female police officer. I said, excuse me, miss, would you come over here? And she came a little bit closer, and I said, I'm a little bit old. Could you help me over the wall? And she said, you better stay where you belong. But anyway, the thing is that I think that people have to get a little more of an activist. I was even told with my little talk on the TPP at City Council, there'll be no protest, even you. And as I sat back down again. So anyway, yes, this will be it's a very interesting time. And I hope some of the doom and gloom does not happen, but I'm not too sure it won't. Thank you.
Okay, that's it for tonight. We see you next week, and this place doesn't close till 10:30, so you can talk to our speakers, carry on, whatever you want to do.
Attack
You can attack the speaker if you like it, so whatever you want to do.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Not next week.
I'll be there next week, Judge.
Right.